Water Security Agencies, myself, I'm Patrick Boyle, Executive Director of Communications and Client Services. I'm just going to set the stage for you, but with me is Clinton Molde, and he's the Executive Director of Integrated Water Services. He's going to cover the details of the project and the presentation.
A lot of the work that's been done to date is at a very high level, at a conceptual, thereabouts level in regards to studies on projects for the expansion. And so certainly I'll provide the details that I can right now, and fully realizing as we go forward and doing that pre-design that we will have more information as we go forward. So when we talk about the Lake Diefenbaker irrigation expansion projects, we're talking essentially two projects here. We're talking the West Side Irrigation Project, which is made up of two phases, both 1 and 2, which could fully develop in around that 340,000 acres. And we're also talking about the Qu'Appelle South Water Conveyance Project, which is phase 3, and that is for about 120,000 acres of irrigation and to provide water for other uses into the future. So I just want to start off giving you a little bit of history of Lake Diefenbaker, and that's important because this is the source for water for irrigation for these projects. And the history of the lake goes back into the dirty 30s, where there was seen to be a need for a secure water supply for southern Saskatchewan, not only for municipal but also for irrigation. So that came to fruition back in 1967 with the completion of Gardner Dam. The reservoir is a multi-purpose and provides fresh water to over 60% of Saskatchewan's population. It, not only for that municipal and irrigation component, but also for industrial, recreation, hydroelectricity through SaskPower's Qu'Appelle generating station. So when we look at the water supply from Lake Diefenbaker, it meets that municipal, recreation, irrigation, hydroelectricity, as well as providing some flood control for downstream landowners. You know, that initial vision for Lake Diefenbaker was for about 500,000 acres of irrigation. Currently, we're at about 20% of that envisioned acres, where we have about 110,000 acres of irrigation that source water out of the lake. Lake Diefenbaker is one of the largest and untapped sources of water in this country. You know, WSA operates the lake on behalf of government, and we've done many analyses and studies of the water within the reservoir, and we see that there's more than enough water to supply these two projects with water as we go forward. You know, we assessed the 88 years of flow data that came into the reservoir, and we found that with no significant change in operation, there's nearly 900,000 acre feet per year of water available for irrigation. And when we look at these two projects developing, potentially they could use up to 700,000 acre feet per year of water. Just to give you a few stats of Lake Diefenbaker, the storage within the lake is about 7.6 million acre feet. The median annual inflow is 4.5 million acre feet, and that's important because in 50% of the years, it more than replenishes at least half of the storage within Lake Diefenbaker. It's approximately 225 kilometers long, and it's a surface area of 110,000 acres. Now, when you look at 500,000 acres of irrigation on that surface area, that's around 5 to 7 feet of water off the top of Lake Diefenbaker when it's full. And just to give you a sense of what that means is when we look at the depth of water at Gardner Dam, it's about 185 feet deep. And when we go to Riverhurst at the ferry crossing, again, it's in that neighborhood of 200 feet deep at that location. So for those of you who may not be familiar with Gardner Dam and the surrounding infrastructure, I just want to show you on this slide and provide an orientation to you of what I'm going to be talking about as we go forward here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the East Side Pump Station, and that's in the right top corner of the slide. And that East Side Pump Station supplies the M1 and the Sioux system with water for a number of uses. Then, of course, we have Gardner Dam. We have the SaskPower's generating station. We have the spillway. But when we get into the red circle as shown in the bottom left-hand corner of the slide, we have Qu'Appelle Bay. And then we have an approach channel which goes into the existing west side pump plant. And then we have a small canal which goes north to northwest from that location. So now I just want to talk about some of the existing east side main canal and the Sioux system. And what you can see in the top picture on this slide is you can see Lake Diefenbaker, you can see Gardner Dam where my cursor is. You can also see at the top of the photo a pump station. So that's the east side pump station. And then from there you can see the canal coming from the pump station that's been recently rehabilitated. That M1 canal is it's about 22.5 kilometers long, and it extends from the pump station north to Broderick Reservoir. And from Broderick Reservoir, the water then enters the Saskatchewan Southeast Water Supply System, or SOUS for short. The total length of that water conveyance system is about 162 kilometers long. It's one of the most important pieces of infrastructure for water in the province. That canal was originally built in the 1960s, and as I mentioned, currently being rehabilitated. It supplies water to approximately 60,000 acres of irrigation in the area, provides water to 6 reservoirs, a number of towns and villages, 4 potash mines, 13 wetland projects. So when you look at these 162 kilometers within the east side SOUS and canal project, what you're looking at is something you would see, but on a greater scale on the west side and on the Qu'Appelle side when we look at full build out of those projects. The bottom photo again just shows you the existing canal as it goes north towards Broderick Reservoir, and as you can see, it has been recently been rehabilitated. Government's been working on this for the past 10 years and put about $100 million into the rehabilitation. Now, when you look at the capacity of this canal, it's about 28 cubic meters a second, which is, about a quarter of the potential capacity with what we would see eventually on the west side as we go forward. Now, this slide is from the announcement back on July 2nd of this year. And just so people further realize where we're talking about phase 1 of the West Side Irrigation Project. And that's centered around some existing infrastructure that extends from basically Lake Diefenbaker north to about Conquest, the village of Conquest. And within that area, there's a potential for about 80,000 acres of irrigation. When we talk phase 2, that again extending phase 1 north to near Asquith and also west towards Rosetown, adds in another 260,000 acres of potential irrigation, and for a total of 340,000 acres. And again, phase 3, the Qu'Appelle South Water Conveyance Project, extends from the Qu'Appelle Dam side on Lake Diefenbaker to the southeast, basically along Highway 42 towards Moose Jaw, but then it also then outfalls into Buffalo Pound. And that is for about 120,000 acres. I want to talk a little bit about the history of the West Side Irrigation Project. The design was done in the 1960s, the same time as the east side was done. The west side, the design was for about 80,000 acres of flood irrigation. The construction started in the late 1960s, but was abandoned in about 1973. With that, there was about 42 of 45 kilometers of canal completed, 95% of the canal. And then at the potential for Conquest Reservoir, there was a one embankment of threes that was completed. And then when you go back towards the lakeside at the pump station, they completed the concrete work. So they did the intake, the wet well, and the pump station floor. Since that time, there was an area of farmers in the McCrory area formed an irrigation district. And what they then did was install a small ditch plug about kilometer 23 in the canal, and that allows them to pump water from into that canal and irrigate 3,000 acres from directly out of the canal. So what to expect in the future from the West Side Irrigation Project? Again, potentially up to 340,000 acres. And I did talk about that area stretching up to Asquith, over to Rosetown. So, but what's that mean? You know, that potentially means 400 kilometers of canal and kilometers of pipeline taking the water from the canal to the edge of the farmer's field. It could mean potentially up to 3 balancing reservoirs that would be useful in the operation of this project. Yeah, here's a drone shot from May of this year. And what it shows you is what's out there at the West Side Canal pump station. And as you can see with my cursor, you can see the approach channel coming from Lake Diefenbaker. And you can see that substructure that was completed or in the abandoned, I should say, in 1973. What the farmers again did was install several pumps to allow them water up the hill into the canal. So in phase 1, you know, this the plan is for this substructure to be fully utilized and put all the pumps in place to support 80,000 acres of irrigation. And when we look at phase 2, what the plan is to then extend the pump station to the west, adding you know, enough capacity for that 340,000 acres. This is another drone shot looking from the canal back towards Lake Diefenbaker, and you can see the pump station from the top there. You know, the current canal capacity or the design capacity is around 21 cubic meters a second. And when we look at phase 1 and that rehab and expansion to meet the full needs of the project, that is going to grow to about 100 cubic meters a second to supply water to 340,000 acres. Again, another aerial photo of the canal, and you can see the growth within the canal. And you can see also in some locations, some seepage areas where my cursor is that farmers have to work around. This is a typical turnout location from the existing West Side Canal. And you can see at the turnout where my cursor is, the pump at this location, which supplies water to the pivot point in the top of the slide there. And here's that same seepage area that the farmer's now working around, as I showed earlier. You know, this is something that we need to address as we go forward with the rehabilitation and the expansion of the irrigation project, is to address seepage, because along with the seepage comes issues around salinity. As I mentioned earlier, about kilometer 23, there is a canal block. And that again allows that to create a small reservoir within the canal to allow to irrigate that 3,000 acres. So for the next 19 kilometers, we have an existing canal that has not seen water for irrigation since it was constructed back in the early 70s. At about kilometer 42, we have the termination of the canal, and it's right at the railway track, and the track itself is where my cursor is, if you can see that, and it's directly adjacent to the village of Conquest. The original plan was to extend this canal, as I mentioned, another 3 kilometers to a low area that would provide a balancing reservoir. Now I just want to shift gears a bit and talk about the Qu'Appelle South Water Conveyance Project. And again, this is at a high level conceptual level point of study. And so when we look at this picture here, we are going to look at constructing canals from the Qu'Appelle, near the Qu'Appelle Dam, and it would go to the southeast, basically along Highway 42. So the cutouts in this slide show, a potential location for a pump station, and it also shows an outfall location into Buffalo Pound Lake that will provide water for the Qu'Appelle system into the future for other water uses. So what to expect in the future on the Qu'Appelle side is, again, 120,000 acres at full development. The area stretching from the Qu'Appelle Dam to Buffalo Pound will be serviced for irrigation, and which means about 100 kilometers of canal. And within the current design, there's one balancing reservoir, and as I mentioned earlier, that outfall back into Buffalo Pound. So what's next? We are proceeding with preliminary design for phases 1 and 2 of the West Side Irrigation Project. And so what's that mean is that we have to address the full project to enable us to do on phase 1. So that phases 1 and 2 are both involved here. In that requirement for what we call the prime consultant, they also will initiate work and support government on the environmental requirements of the project, and also in the engagement process as we go forward here with the development of the project. Now, when we look at the work that's been done, that's essentially been done at almost a desktop level. And as we go forward with the preliminary design, the pre-design, we need to start bringing in some information from the ground to further refine the design and give us better cost estimates as we go forward. So we need to acquire LiDAR, and that's something we've already started. We picked up about a third of the area this fall, and we'll be doing the remainder in the spring. We need to conduct soil testing. And what I mean by that is we need to go out and sample individual quarter sections of land to give us a sense if that area would be irritable. And that will directly inform the design for the project. We also need to go out and do geotechnical testing, not only looking at the pump station area along the existing canal and at the reservoir, but also other areas that have not been developed yet, potentially where other reservoirs are and along other other canal routes. We want to proceed with project planning. And right now, we are doing that with a number of committees and working groups working forward to do that planning and analysis for this project. And, we are actively engaged with discussions with the federal government, and that's something that Lyle brought forward in his video. And Lyle also mentioned too that we are committed to move forward with doing soils on the Qu'Appelle Water Conveyance Project this year also. So I think we all recognize the the potential benefits of these projects. You know, we're looking at all those community benefits, providing jobs and you know, for communities in the area for Saskatchewan. We're looking at the engineering and environmental activities, the work involved around that, all the construction requirements over this build out of these projects from phases 1 through 3. You know, when we look at the operation and maintenance, the long-term operation of these projects and the related job opportunities, goes without saying the potential, you know, supplying local irrigation equipment and the food processing industry that will grow around these projects. You know, we talk about the economic value added through the construction piece, but that is also through the food end too. You know, that food processing part. You know, we also talk about enhanced food security. So in a time such as this around COVID, providing a secure source of food for Saskatchewan and Canada is very important. It allows us to bring on more acreages and diversify our crop mix into those high value table crops. You know, more potatoes, carrots, cucumbers, peas, that sort of thing will certainly help drive the benefits of these projects. You know, we also want to talk a little bit about climate change adaptation. As we go forward with climate change, we want to make sure that we use the water, store the water in Lake Diefenbaker and use it where we can for different water uses, and in this case, irrigation. It also provides climate change resiliency, you know, from the fact drought proofing, additional 500,000 acres of irrigation with the water stored in Lake Diefenbaker. We have reached out to a number of communities, stakeholders, and RMs within the West Side area, and you know, essentially providing the same presentation and talking to them. And you know, they're asking the question, you know, why aren't we moving forward with this project? The sooner the better. So you know, they're quite anxious to move forward with these projects. I want to talk a little bit about project governance to give you a sense of the involvement of government on the West Side Irrigation Project. Lyle Stewart is the executive sponsor for this project. Under that, we have the steering committee, and the steering committee is made up of the deputy ministers, the presidents, the CEO, the security, the Ministry of Agriculture, SAS Builds, Finance, and then Trade and Economic Development, and that is Ted. So under that, we have the core project team, WSA, Agriculture, and SAS Builds are part of that. And on today's call, we have Jason Drury, myself, and Aaron Paulet is also involved in this call today. We're all members of that core project team. But under that, we have working groups, and working groups are in different categories, I think from environmental, land, communications and engagement, right through to procurement. And we have staff from across government. You know, we have staff from environment, from government relations, finance, like I say, many ministries. So we truly are one team as we move this project forward. So in conclusion, you know, Premier Moe and Lyle Stewart used the words transformational, generational when we describe these expansion projects. You know, we all recognize the significant economic benefit that these projects will bring to the area farmers and to the province as a whole. We talk about the agriculture and food processing industry and the value that it brings and the potential to bring in those food processing companies. We know we can talk earlier about the improving Saskatchewan's and Canada's food supply, of course, creating jobs as we go forward here. And of note too, improves climate resiliency. So Joel, that ends my presentation.
Terrific. That was awesome. Thanks so much, Clinton. Good overview, good background. The visuals were great in terms of, you know, where the projects is going to be going. I think that that already answered a lot of questions probably in the presentation and made the ideas a lot more concrete. And I think you really fleshed out a lot of the larger benefits that we're going to see in terms of resiliency and water distribution that sometimes are lost in the shuffle when people just focus on what can happen on farm.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's major benefits there, but there are some macro benefits with some of this stuff too. So that's terrific.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, it's very high level at this point. But as you determine more details and go out and talk and engage with stakeholders, more information will be coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a chance too. I mean, there's lots of irrigation projects worldwide. We have a chance to look at their advantages and disadvantages, and correct some of the mistakes that they made and do it right. So it's feels like we're in a very privileged position and to reiterate what the Honorable Lyle Stewart said. We will probably have the best opportunity in North America in terms of irrigation and really utilizing our water resources. So yeah.
Yeah, just something to mention here, Joel, it's Patrick too. Just on that same thought process is looking at this project. Part of it is, innovation and using what the modern technologies are and innovations that we do have, and potentially what can come out of this. So it's sort of a blank canvas from that end of things, and we started some of those initial discussions on how do you use some of those modern technologies to advance that in this whole thing. So it's certainly an opportunity in many different ways.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, well, we'll move on to some questions. I see that one has shown up in the comments from Anthony Eliason. He says, thank you for that. These will be some great projects for the province and the country. I wish to ask about the Seuss. With the current rehab expansion underway, when will we see new water allocation?
And Patrick, I can start on that.
Sure.
Certainly with the expansion, the rehabilitation, we are created a little bit more capacity in the M1 portion of the Seuss system. And we're starting to look through and sort out the existing allocations and trying to see what excess there may be available in the future. So we're just at the start of that, Elias.
Yeah, and right now we're investing about in one portion of the Seuss. I think it's the beginning portion. It's roughly $5-6 million this year in a capital project to do some rehabilitation work there, just on the beginning of that. So if you look at the M1, that was about a 10-year project worth $100 million, and kind of moving on now up through that system and into the Seuss. So I think there's a lot of that conversation going on, and like Clinton said, review of those, what's currently there and what also could be done. To expand that and potential uses.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Another question from Greg Sarvis. Has the prime consultant been selected, and any idea when we could see some physical construction start? Of course, that's going to be on everybody's mind. What kind of timelines are we looking at?
Clinton, do you want me to start and then you jump in, or vice versa? I can just start with answer that too. So, yeah, it's a good question, and something that we all want to start tomorrow and continue to do that. And the timelines are always something to get fixated on. So I think what we're doing right now is moving forward with that process with the prime consultant and trying to move that in the next weeks ahead here and go along. There's that pesky provincial election get in the way, so that kind of shuts things down a little bit, and now government's back up and running and moving forward, so we're going to keep moving forward with that. So timeline wise, I think we have to respect all the processes that we need to go in place and move this along. So we're going through that right now, and the first step is that prime consultant. I think we're working towards that here, and want to move that down the road pretty quickly over the next number of weeks. Clinton, anything to add on that?
No, I think that was a good answer, Patrick.
Yeah, and I think that's the same thing. I think the next question there about the timelines there for the construction timeline we're looking at is 10 years. Now, keep in mind this project, construction of 10 years and full build out with the uptake, it's a long-term thing. When we talk about generational, we talk 30, 40 years down the road here, when we're looking at that whole picture to see. And it's interesting because if you look back to Lake Diefenbaker and the actual creation of it 50 years ago and the benefits today. And as I sit here and I look at this pen I have, and it says Town of Outlook and the irrigation capital of Saskatchewan, if that piece of infrastructure wasn't built then, do I have this pen in my hand and that development of Outlook? Maybe not. So it's an interesting conversation, but we're working towards those timelines and try to move it ahead here. So
perfect. That's great. We have a follow-up, another question. I think it's in the same vein, and I think you don't have to answer this one because I think you just answered it in terms of the sort of the 10-year timelines. But Dale Miller had said, "Good presentation. As the developer of the concept for both projects, I couldn't have did a better overview myself. What is the potential timeline for the 3 phases?" I think you highlighted that in the last question in terms of that sort of that 10-year. It's always a good sign when people are when you announce something and people are saying, how soon can we get it? Of course, you could always have the reverse where people are saying, oh gosh, please don't. So I mean, when people are chomping at the bit for you to get started, that's already a good sign. So that's exciting. Got another question here from Anthony Eliason. When it comes to economics, can these new irrigation districts start to sell water to industry cities, or are they funded only by water service agreements?
Patrick, you want me to take a go at that one first?
yeah, sure. Go ahead, Clinton.
For sure. That's one of the reasons why we talk about the east side and what's happened there, providing water not only to irrigation, but also to, 4 potash mines and numerous towns and villages. So sure, when we look at both of these projects, and certainly on the Qu'Appelle side, we recognize that there will be water supply for other uses such as municipal and industrial as we go forward. Keep in mind that these systems are seasonal. So when we look at year-round water supply, we have to look at storage, and that's becomes important.
Great. Any other questions? Again, feel free to put something in the conversation or raise your hand and you can speak freely.